Michael.
In the bike corner, weighing in at 165 pounds in his bank account, the biker from Edinburgh, the peddler from the Bruntsfield area, the coaster from the East Coast. Everybody, put your hands together for Mike, the bicycle. Hello! Hello! I'm already on the wrong point, so this is great. Thank you so much for coming. Haven't you always wanted a boxer-style introduction, even if you have to do it yourself? I have, and so now I've gone and bloody done it. Welcome. My name is Mike. As Diego said, I'll also introduce you to the real star of the show. This is Joe. It's Joe King, because surly you can't be serious. For those of you who don't know what a surly is, that's this type of bike. That kind of tortured joke. If you don't like that, maybe you should leave now. Okay, so picture the scene. You're in Tunisia, and you've cycled to the end of the road on your map. But at the end of the road, there's still road that continues. So you start cycling down this road. You're off your map. You cycle to the end of this bumpy, dusty road, and you get to a path. And you're like, there's no map here. I don't know where this is going to end up, but I'm going to follow it anyway. So you set off into the mountains, up this rocky goat path, bumping your way up there. That slowly / quickly turns into no path at all. You're well in the mountains now. And the main priorities are to find some water and a place to camp for the night. You've got a couple of hours until sunset, so you carry on. At this point, really just carrying the bike on your shoulder over rocks, but you're actually immensely happy at being in this place. So you keep going until across a valley you see a shepherd with his sheep or goats. Is it a goatherd if they have goats? I think it is. And you wave at them, try and communicate, but you've tried to learn some Arabic over the past few weeks in Tunisia, but learning Arabic has not been like pulling teeth, it's been trying to put teeth back in. So to say it was painful, it was extremely painful. So you communicate with him to some extent, and it reassures you that here you're getting somewhere, that you're going to get back to a road, you're going to find some water, everything's going to be fine. Another 20 minutes, half an hour, and you re-find the road. It's dusty, it's bumpy, it's like, it's not much of a road, but it's some sort of road, and roads tend to lead somewhere. So you think, okay, everything's going to be fine. So first priority, find some water. There's a man up ahead, and he's got a massive bundle of twigs, and he's like staggering along, and you come up to him and wave your bottle at him to kind of the universal sign for water. He nods enthusiastically and beckons you to follow him. So you follow him, and he scoops some water out of a well. Would be a really like generous word for this thing, because it's just an open hole in the ground. It looks like it's a stock. So he scoops something out and hands it to you, and you're like, great, water. Just going to put this in my bottle rather than drink it straight away. Whereas he enthusiastically swigs from it and is like, great, water. You're looking at this water and you think, I'm going to have to boil the literal living crap out of this. It's like swimming. And you're like, maybe I can boil it and cook it and maybe it'll be okay. So anyway, you take that water, find a camp spot, make a little fire and cook your dinner. And you're going to camp, you're in the middle of nowhere, it's beautiful. It gets dark and you've made your dinner, turn around and there's just two figures there looking at you. And you're like, okay, that's kind of creepy. Really feels like the middle of nowhere. But you're like, it's Tunisia, it's pretty safe, just see what they want. Again, that putting teeth back in language barrier meant couldn't exactly understand who they were, what they wanted, other than that I should follow them. I really tried to insist that, no, I'm fine, I actually want to camp. And they were like, no, come with us. So kind of cobble my bits together and follow them into the darkness, down a dusty road, in what I think is in the middle of nowhere. And they take me into a building, come into the building, and it's their living room, and their dad's there, and he's like, oh, who's this guy? And then their mum comes in, clearly a bit like perturbed that she has to then feed this guest, but they're all extremely happy to, the two brothers, as it turns out, are extremely happy to have me. And I spend the night and the morning with them. This is their sheep and animals, and this is the beautiful square in their house. This was the kind of living room with the TV where I slept, and over there was another room with his kitchen and another sleeping room. And this kind of enforced hospitality, or hostage-patality as I came to think of it, was a recurring theme throughout this trip, nowhere more so than in Tunisia. But also the kind of attitude of rolling with the punctures that one must adopt when you're not quite sure what the hell is going to happen. But if you go at it with positivity and your wits about you, it's probably going to end up not where you expected, but somewhere good. I'm going to take us back to the beginning, all the way to talk us through very blurry top of this slide. Do you want to? Never mind. I don't. I think it's mostly this slide that you can tell that on. Anyway, what happened? What was I doing? I was cycling from Paynton, if you know, you know, to Greece, with a boat and another boat and another boat and some bits of train here, but otherwise cycling the whole way. I'm going to talk about a couple of countries for quite a while and most of the other countries for not very long at all. Starting off with England, you're probably all familiar with England. This was me departing from the Custom Coffee Co. in Paynton with a one-gun salute. This man here had one of those massive poppers that gave me the fright of my life. From there, left, cycled along the coast to get the boat from England to Spain. Yes, took a boat to England, baby, maybe to Spain. That's probably the only thing that's going to happen tonight, I'm afraid. Spain was incredible. It might have been that I was arriving there like, I'm going on an adventure. It's right at the start. I'm super excited, but it's also a very beautiful, civilized country that, again, you probably know a fair amount about. It was definitely one of my favorite places that I visited. Lots of sweet grav, alcohol-free beers everywhere, and yes, as much as I was approaching the mountains and thinking, ooh, my Pyrenees, it was actually fantastic, including, and not limited to, crapping myself next to a graveyard, which unfortunately the video for that is not loading, so we'll just move past that. to France, where, what can I say about France other than pastries and more pastries? Again, France, you're probably familiar with, it's south of here, has good pastries. From France, I took the boat to Tunisia. This boat I can highly recommend not booking a cabin, just get your sleeping mat and whatnot, find a nice little spot in the boat, camp, and also definitely the croissants. One of the best croissants I ever had in my life. As I'm rolling up to this boat at like 6 a.m. on a very beautiful Marseille morning, there's I can tell that I'm going somewhere different because there's all these cars that are laden with like a whole mattress on top of the roof, and the car is stuffed with whole lives that are being shifted around. And I think, okay, I'm getting out of Europe, I'm going somewhere new. The boat is, an overall grand experience, and then I arrive slap down into Tunis. I spent a week in Tunis trying to kind of arrive and acclimatize, try and pick up a bit more Arabic, which, as we've discovered already, didn't go that well. The first day arriving in Tunis, and you're cycling on the right-hand side of the road, and there's a car coming towards you on the left-hand side of the road, and you're like, yep, fine, normal. But then there's a car coming towards you on the right of you as well. First time that happens, it's a bit like, oh my God, what the hell is going on here? But by the second or third day, you're like, yep, that's fine. That's just how traffic works. And the kind of the chaos of it all just is quite self-regulating, I found. And everyone's kind of going everywhere, but they're not doing it that fast, so they're kind of quite forgiving if you do something a bit unexpected. I really enjoyed hanging out in the Medina in Tunis, which is a beautiful, kind of completely car-free, very people-friendly place. Not particularly bike-friendly, I'll admit. Like, this was actually one of the wider streets in the Medina. There were some parts where my handlebars, which are particularly wide handlebars, barely even fit through. At some point, someone took me through the actual most busy part of the Medina, full of shops and people, and it was a terrible idea to have a bike there. Yeah, I spent a week there kind of getting to know a bit about the country as well. There was a very helpful group called the Nomadic Bike. I guess it's called the Nomadic Bike Cafe, but it's also the Nomadic Bike is just the name of their group, and it's cycle tours from Tunisia who were invaluable in planning my route, because when you're planning your route down to the south of Tunisia, it's like, okay, at this point you get your water and your food, because the next water and food is 100 kilometers through the desert, so make sure you get it there. And I'm like, cool, noted. Except I didn't actually note it, I just looked at it on the map and was like, yeah, I'll remember that. Beautiful Tunisia. So with the help of the Nomadic Bike Cafe, I planned this route to set off from, this is Carthage. So Carthage was the second city of Rome, unless someone can say that I'm wrong about that, but I don't think I am. Tunisia was kind of the second seat of Rome. It was the bread basket. They used to grow all sorts of wheat and whatnot. So this was the where the water from a 130 kilometer aqueduct would arrive to. So I decided that I would try and go the other way, follow the aqueduct as far as I could to its source at Zagwan. This aqueduct, built originally 2,000 plus years ago, just absolutely I couldn't believe the engineering that went into that. No computers, barely even paper, and still loads of it is massive and beautifully intact. And as you can see from my stupid face, I was completely mind blown. I was following it, and each day or so, I followed it for a couple of days, and it would kind of disappear, and then you'd find bits again, and then disappear. And then I took a detour to Udine, which is another amazing Roman site that I basically had to myself. You can see Joe here, just about. It was, it's a massive kind of amphitheater. I have it to myself. Of course, I'm doing gladiator impressions, being like, "Are you not entertained?" No one responded, so I presume that they were. Yeah, from there, I carried back on, finding more of this aqueduct, and at some points you could even kind of get up right inside it and walk along sections. Amazing. Eventually I made it to Zagwan, where the aqueduct originally flowed from. 130 kilometers, just mind-blowing the work that's gone into that. Zagwan is just this mountain that kind of rises from basically a plain, some really nice cycling around that area. I arrived there on the third weekend of Ramadan. Traveling around at Ramadan was a kind of an interesting time in terms of finding food more than anything. So this is in Zagwan, and the iftar is the time when the fast is broken at sundown. So it's often a time when you can find food again, except I found often I was struggling to restaurants wouldn't be open, and I didn't quite understand how people actually got food. So I would often find myself wandering through a town about that time, hoping that I would chance upon some food. And more often than not, I really lucked out. This, for instance, I was walking through the town, looking at anywhere that might be food, and I saw this table full of food with guys sitting around it outside a cafe. So I was like, great, this cafe is selling food. And I went up to them and I was like, hey, can I order some food? And they looked at me slightly puzzled, and they were like, no, this is our food. And I was like, oh, okay. But then they were like, but have a seat. And they drew out a plate, filled this plate with food. And it turned out I was sat down with the second or third biggest Sufi band in Tunisia. And they were about to play the most lit show. It was wild. They had these massive flags that they were flapping. They had these huge drums that they warmed up over the coals before the gig. They took me backstage to kind of show me how they did all that. And the whole town just became alive. And there was people on roofs, and every street was like jammed with people, and they were out dancing, and no one was drinking, and it was still the most like wild party. Great times. From there, things started to get more different, shall we say. This, for instance, for anyone who's afraid of snakes, it was extremely dead. From this area, you're kind of transitioning from where there's about 1 billion olive trees to where it starts getting much, much drier. And there was something that told me that I'd come a long way. Oh no, boo. This was just on the outskirts of Kairouan, which is this fantastic, the Medina in Kairouan is this fantastic blue, like everything is blue, all the doors, all the windows. I don't know if it's like a law or if it's just like, keeping up with the Joneses, but it's all beautiful and blue. And this was the last weekend of Ramadan. So it was completely deserted. Like everyone was like doing their last bit of fasting before a big celebration that night. So I had the place to myself, and it was stunning. Whilst I was wandering around, kind of just losing myself in the little alleyways, I came across two, what I would call likely lads. And they were like, hey, you want to come see the big mosque? And I was like, sure, I like a big mosque as much as the next man. So they walked me through the alleyways to the big mosque. And we're like, there you go, there it is. And they're like, okay, we're going this way. And I was like, sure, I'm in for a ride. Let's just see where the wind takes me. And so we walk through the kind of the old town, and then we walk out of one of the gates of the old town into the new town, and I'm like, this is an interesting tourist tour. And we just start going like, out into the suburbs, and I'm like, they're probably fine. I mean, they kept seeming to be like introducing me to everyone. They'd be like, hey, this guy, we've found this guy, we're gonna go and take him. And I was like, they're probably not gonna murder me if they're like introducing me to everyone. It's not a very good alibi. And then at some point, the discussion about a mouton fight comes up, and I'm like, okay, I don't really know what that means. Mouton, sheep, I'm gonna go with that. And they're talking about, we're gonna go and see mouton fight. And I'm like, okay, I'm not sure I wanna do that, but I'll follow along for a while. And then they're like, okay, like it seems to be taking a long time, but eventually they're like, right, we're really gonna go now. And I'm like, I really don't feel like I'm comfortable with this. And I feel even less comfortable with this when I come around the corner and there's this angry ass looking ram about to be loaded into this pickup truck. And the idea is that we're gonna go in the pickup truck with the ram and it's gonna be taken to a fight. And I'm like, this has got too real for me, guys. I am out. And then in true kind of rolling with the Punctures fashion, within the space of about 15 to 20 minutes from this picture being taken, I'm on the top of like this high-end hotel, looking down at the Grand Mosque where that adventure with those young lads had started, having basically asked someone in the street, excuse me, mate, have you got the time? So it really was a wild kind of transformation of fortunes. So from Kairouan, I went east to El Jem. El Jem is the second biggest Colosseum outside of Rome. Again, it's just like massive, amazingly intact, and this is the queue for the second biggest Colosseum outside of Rome. So, yes, to say it was quiet would be an understatement. These are some, gives you some sort of sense of the scale. These are some people down here. Beautiful and peaceful, and basically the town is just, there's someone looking to come in who should be coming in. They're Greek, I'm half Greek, so I can say that it's in our culture to be this late. Hello, Alexia. Sorry. Anyway, so this Colosseum, it exists, but basically the town is this Colosseum and then modern Tunisian town. And the way it just sits there, completely untouched by the rest of the town, except for an amazing museum full of what I always call murals, but are in fact mosaics. This is like probably barely a quarter of the real size of this mosaic. Like massive, massive walls full of them, based around the original site of a Roman villa that's there, that some parts still remain. The detail and everything, This isn't the funniest one, but some of them had really funny faces. This one I just felt was the most impressive in terms of its, the scale of it, especially when you see it massive. From there, things start getting much more, I often use the word Martian, but that seems like a really lazy analogy for something that's kind of reddish and very dry. But fantastic and spectacular. This is in the Boehedma National Park, which I got briefly adopted by a Belgian family on their cycling holiday and taken into this park. That was another moment where I found out about this national park, and then about 5 minutes later I met this tour guide guy who was going to take this family into the national park, and he was like, "You're the luckiest man in the world. Normally you have to go and get visas and you have to get whatever passes and stuff to get in this national park, and you're just waltzing in." In this landscapes, any kind of scrap of greenery or shade, especially shade, is so amazing to find and so valuable. There was a lot of this, and so from the national park, I was going to find this oasis, which quite a lot of the local people had told me, "Don't go there, it's dirty." And to be fair to them, it was dirty, but I'm also extremely glad that I went there because it was probably one of the most intense, let's say, experiences of the whole trip. So I go in, dip down into the palm trees, and under the palm trees, each palm tree, there's a family making tea and food and hanging out, having a great time. One of the things that drew me there, I'm a great lover of the sauna, steam bath, etc. I was promised there was a natural hammam in this place. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but I'm going to go and explore. So when I arrive, I'm like, all right, guys, where's this hammam? And they're like, the women are bathing, so you have to wait. So I was like, okay, I'll wait, have tea with these guys, just hang out for a while. Time goes by. Eventually, from this little clown door, about 35 women emerge. And I'm like, okay, I guess it's the men's turn. And so we enter, again, about 30 men, and we go through this small door, and there's a small pool of water, and I'm looking around, this is gonna be cozy. But in the rock, there's an entrance. It's not too much more than an arm's length and a bit. And when you're squatting in the water about this much above your head, and the water's up to here, and you go in, and it's getting closer and darker and darker. Go right into the end, and me and 30 Tunisian men chatting away loudly in Arabic, and it's reverberating in this small space. Quite an intense experience at that point, and it's only going to get more so, because after the chat, they've broken the ice, they get into the singing, which went a little something no, I'm not going to try. So the volume goes up, and it's dark, and the kind of warm water, the sensory overload is really high. And then just in this kind of half light, I see that what's coming next is back rubs. What can only be described as vigorous back rubs. This man up to my side didn't need the honors. I was so kind of stunned and thrown. I have the shame to say that I did not reciprocate. After what might have been hours or days, time, I don't know, I staggered out like this. Into the light, into the kind of pool of water, and there's a chap shaving. And I was like, oh, I could do with a shave, yeah. Go and find my razor and get to shaving. He takes some sort of umbrage to this, decides I'm not really doing it right. So he grabs me and what can only be described as forcefully shaves me. So I stagger out, kind of cleansed, shaved, really like I've had an experience. This was actually the same day that the story that I opened with was on. So that day it was quite a day. Some of the days on this trip, I was like, was that a week or was that a day? Because earlier in the day, I'd also gone to go and find my Leatherman, which with the Belgian family, we'd been in this national park, and I'd lent the Leatherman to someone to do some repairs on. And when we got back to camp, they'd been like, no, we don't have the Leatherman. And so I had to go back into the national park and find it in the sand, which I bloody well did. Like, after much scavenging around kind of where there was footprints, I found a tiny little bit of shiny metal, and there it was, one of my most important tools. So I was glad I went back. This is just a slide of amazing landscapes to give us time to kind of palate cleanse and move on to Hamid, who is my absolute, like literally he, at the end of our journey together, which is a little bit of a spoiler alert, was like, "You are my brother." And I was like, "Man, thank you so much. This was amazing." And he was like, "No, you're my brother. You don't need to say thank you." And I was like, "Pretty sure I say thank you to my brother, but noted." So if you're cycle touring in Tunisia, you can get into a kind of ladder system of staying with one person who does cycle touring, and they're like, "Oh, you're going this way. You'll go and stay with this guy." And then he's like, "Oh, you're going that way. You'll go and stay with this person," etc., etc. So I was going to go past where Hamid lives, but he was really insistent. He was like, "No, come to my house, stay at my house. The next day, me and you cycling together." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, man, but like, I really want to go somewhere where there's like no cars." And I mean like no cars. And he was like, "Okay, man, I got you." And he's got like this knowing look. And I was like, interesting. So we set off from Midlawi, where he lives, which is a big phosphate mining town. Go down the road, main road, turn off to a side road. And the road's getting smaller and smaller until we're heading towards a cliff. And there's just a cliff. And I'm like, okay, I don't know how bikes and this are going to work, but certainly no cars. In the cliff, there's a small opening, which, as we approach, bloody perspective, gets bigger and bigger. And out of this opening, there's a railway track. So I'm like, okay. And quite inexplicably, there's a man stood outside this tunnel. I'm not quite sure if it's a real job, but he certainly extorted some money from us. And I'm like, okay, so this man, he works, works, next to this railway track. So surely the one thing that he will know is, when does the train come? Can you guess? He did not know. So I asked Hamid, okay, so we're going in here, but there's a train track. What happens if a train comes? And he's like, looks at me like I'm a stupid man, and he's like, move out of the way, which is solid advice for life. So anyway, we go into the tunnel, and it's dark, and at the end there's just like a postage stamp of light, and we're kind of cycling to the side of the railway tracks. It's just about the right texture, kind of walking. Eventually, after a few hundred meters, we come out into the light and into the most amazing canyon. And it's just us and this railway track and like nothing else. And it's like the land before time. And we're cycling what feels like miles and miles and hours, cycling and pushing and generally making our way. The only thing else that's in this canyon is this amazing kind of oasis running down the bottom, and the sound of the like crickets and frogs and other things that I don't know the names of just reverberating off the walls. It was absolutely stunning, spectacular, almost like indescribable how much I love this place. This, I think, is my most amazing piece of adventure biking possibly ever. And I say adventure biking because there was not that much cycling, but there was some. Of course, at some point, the train came. Hamid, being more experienced with trains, he went and put his phone in the rubble there to do a video of the train rolling over it. I stood well aside and was like, no thanks. This next picture just gives you some sort of sense of scale. These are this is Joe, and I can't remember Hamid's bike's name. Anyhow, so it feels like we've been in there for like days and days and days, but it's not even lunchtime yet. So we emerge through the last tunnel into where the phosphate, I'm gonna say phosphate, but is that what's in bananas or is that what's in rocks? Anyone? Phosphorus?
Rocks. Yeah.
Cool. Anyway.
Potassium is in bananas.
That's the one. Good. I need to stop second guessing myself. Yes, as a straight white man, I need to be more self-confident. That's what we all need. Anyway, emerge out of the final tunnel into where the phosphate mining is happening, where they've just blown up the mountain and it's just dust everywhere. Back on main roads, and we're cycling towards lunch. I'm cycling out ahead, Hamid is behind me, and as we're going along, there's a taxi that pulls up to the side and stops. And I have in my head, I'm like, maybe I should give him a call in case he doesn't see that. That's like, he's not that far behind me, but he's kind of far enough behind me that I'm like, nah, he'll probably notice it. I pull out and go round it, and I look back, and he's just there staring into his phone, and he slams straight into the back of his taxi, and I'm like, oh my God, he's dead. Like, he's definitely dead. And I'm like, do a slow turn around to be like, shit. And he's actually just sat on the ground having a right laugh with the taxi driver, who's also having a right laugh. There's a slight like crack in one of the lights, but apart from a small graze on Hamid's head, seems like he's gotten away with this, which is remarkable. He's not wearing a helmet. He's just hit that really, really hard with his solid head, it turns out. So eventually, after a little sit down, he gets up, gets his bike, and he's like, right, let's go again. And I'm like, really? Let's maybe like take about 4 more hours to like check you're okay. But he picks up his bike to cycle, and although he's okay, the bike is not. I'm not like the world's greatest bike mechanic, but this isn't what bikes should look like. Fortunately, his cousin materializes from kind of nowhere with a car, a saloon car that he's like, okay, let's put the bikes in here. I'm like, 1 bike will not fit in there, let alone 2 bikes. Of course, we like dismantle the bikes and jam them in, and we're good to go. We have lunch after the hospital appointment. He's fine. 2 days later, he's texting me being like, hey man, I'm back on my bike. Not that bike, but a different bike, cycling again. This is a insanely strong, very funny man. The day before I met him, he had just cycled from the coast of Tunisia to his house, which is like 250 kilometers. Something else. This is canyon territory. This is the Midas Canyon. Some joke about everything you touch turn to gold, etc. Right on the border with Algeria. You could cycle kind of through sandy desert part, up this really narrow part, and then it opened out into amazing canyon. And then I really got to the edge of the desert. This is Tozeur. The city is renowned for this kind of brickwork. It's right on the edge of the desert, so it's, if anything, the most like touristy town that I probably went to, which is not very touristy at all. From here, I went on a short detour of the O Bike One Canoe Bike. O Bike One Canoe Bike? Anyway, I went to see Luke's aunt and uncle's house. They had cleared up all of the charred dead bodies, so that was nice, good for the tourists. This was supposed to be a rest day, but instead I did one of the longest days of my whole trip. In Tunisia, I just couldn't help but cycle every day and try and see everything, which, top tip, don't do that. You'll see where it gets you. In this part of the country, you're getting into like next turn in the road / water / food, 50, 60, 70 kilometers. This is on the way through the Chott El Djerid, which is a massive salt lake. And I'm there, and I'm asleep in a salt factory, which sounds like a hipster boutique hotel, but is in fact a massive industrial place that's not really well suited for sleeping. And the next morning, set off again, and inexplicably there's one cafe in the middle of what feels like absolutely nowhere, but it's also a very captive audience because everyone has to go on this road. In the cafe, they're like pointing towards the direction I'm going, and they're like, oh, meteo, no good. And I'm like, meteorological, weather, bad weather. And I'm like, come on, mate, I'm from Scotland. How bad can it be? Turns out, really bad. So here I was in my first sandstorm. I had bought some like cool cycling glasses because I'm like, I'm going to the desert, I'll need these. This sandstorm made a mockery of those. It also cleaned my bike the most clean it had been all trip, but only on the one side. Like sand-blasted clean. Yeah, wonderful stuff. This was also what I like to think of as Mad Mike's Fury Road, where I really discovered the true benefit of bringing swimming goggles. I think I used them for much more time in the desert than I used them in the water. This was the angle of the wind meant that I was covering distance extremely slowly. In 4 hours, I covered 20 kilometers, if that's right. Yeah. Every time like a truck would go past me, I'd be like jerked around to the side, and wind was like not quite head on, but like just off head on. So I was fighting for every like meter. And then in true rolling with the Punctures fashion, I went from that to this, which is not just water. This is thermal heated water. And I mean, I'm the kind of cyclist who thinks that pedaling is the worst part of cycling. And I really feel like maybe I should just give up bikes and travel by heated flume. Because here you like went out and then it turned a corner and it was just a kind of network of channels feeding water to like farms, and you could just float down it on your back. It was blissful. What I didn't get a picture of, inexplicably, was the massive building behind it that at some point used to house all this geothermal water, but it now was basically a ruin that was just spraying water all over the place. Like the water was channeled up to the roof and then just like dumped everywhere. It was quite terrifying and dramatic. Here we're really getting to the desert, and in the desert they say don't walk around without shoes on and don't leave your tent open. I think I was doing all two of those things at this very moment. Camels just kind of were there as I woke up, a bit bemused as to who I was. In this deserty area, my invaluable knowledge from the nomadic bike cafe of where to stop, where to get water, where to get food, it was really going to come into play. So we'd crossed the salt lake into the desert. That turning point, the one turning point where you're going to get all those things, that was here, and it was closed. So I sat dejectedly in the shade for a while. Someone pulled up, stopped, and was like, "Oh, you need food?" And I was like, "Oh, yes, I do." They gave me like 5 baguettes. And then someone else stopped and was like, "Oh, you need water?" I was like, "Oh, yes, I do." And they stopped and gave me water, and I was like, "Great, I'll carry on then." To the next place where I could get food and water, which mostly was supplying sand. So just after this, I was cycling along the road, and there's this encounter that still baffles me to this day. I'm cycling this way, and a car comes from behind me, stops in front of me, says, "Oh, you need water?" And I'm like, yeah, I do need water. Fill up some of my bottles and stuff. And then he gets back in his car, and he turns around, and he goes back that way. And I'm like, where did you come from? Did I hallucinate you? But I definitely have water. The desert is that kind of place where if you have a car and you see someone on a bike, you're like, this person probably needs my help. The desert, if you've not been, lots of sand, but fantastic, special place. Like, I grew up in Scotland, which has a lot of like wild and peaceful places, but mostly because they killed all the people or put them out somewhere else and killed all the trees and put sheep on it. And that it's like a silence of absence. Whereas in the desert, although obviously there's a certain amount of absence, the way that it's been like built up over the millennia that have created this desert makes the silence so like thick and rich that it's just indescribable and super special. It's also very much not a place to take a bike. So I got to this place called Ksar which is another oasis, and this one's really right in the desert, like the first real proper desert oasis. And there I met a chap who was traveling on a motorbike. Boo, motorbikes. No, they're fine. And we agree that there's this there's a Roman fort like 4 kilometers from where we are, and we both say, right, we'll go out there and we'll camp. So he's going to go his way and I'm going to go my way. I ask around in the oasis whether it's safe to go take a bike to this fort. And the one guy I chat to, he's like, yeah, it's fine. Like, they go there with the quad bikes and stuff, no problem. Now, my experience of cycle touring is generally, if there's like a small bump in the road, people are like, no, you can't cycle there, you'll die. There's this guy being like, yeah, it's fine. I'm like, it must be really easy. So I set off. Within less than 5 minutes, I'm like, this is a terrible idea. I should quit, I should turn back. But my mate with a motorbike, he's gonna have made it there, and he's gonna be waiting for me. And if I don't turn up, he's gonna be like, oh, he's stuck in the sand, better go and find him. He'll die too. I can't really live with that. So I persevere. So to cover these 4 kilometers takes me 2 hours. Which, I mean, I'm no great mathematician, but apparently is not a very fast pace. But I get there, get to the fort. gonna camp there. Looking all around, calling this guy's name. The bastard is not there. Look at my phone, and he's like, "Hey, buddy, I'm in the bar. Come and join me for a beer." Screw you. I'm here now. I'm gonna camp. So I set up, and this was like the one few square meters where the wind wasn't absolutely belting into into my tent, and yet I still ended up with this much sand inside my tent and subsequent lungs, etc. And then the next morning, I just had to go back the way I came. Still worth it. I mean, there wasn't any stars or any of that like romantic shit you're supposed to get in the desert. It was just like kind of hazy and like, but still, good experience. Would probably not do again. Spent another night in the oasis, resting, recuperating, to leave the following day. And I'm getting ready to leave, and people there are like, "No, you can't leave because it's a sandstorm." I'm like, "Oh, it's a sandstorm, but I know where the wind is coming from, and the wind is coming from behind me." So I'm like, feeling pretty smug about this. Set off into the sandstorm. Got my goggles on, got my buff up. I'm ready. First part's not quite with the wind behind me, and then I get onto the main road, and the wind's just behind me. So I'm going like 35, 40 kilometers an hour, not pedaling, going uphill. It's like I have a motorbike. It's brilliant. And then, like an absolute dickhead, I bring out my phone to try and film this cool thing. I hit a freaking pothole, and then I'm trying to fix a puncture in the middle of the sandstorm. This was during the real key rolling with the punctures, where the punctures part really came into play. This was a period of the trip where I was having roughly 2 punctures per day. I was losing the will to live, or to cycle, or to anything. And occasionally it was from like stupid behavior like this. Occasionally it was from like the massive thorns that you got in some parts. And then there was a lot of this error that seemed to keep happening between the handlebars and the saddle. That was me. So once I got better at fixing punctures, it did help a bit. This is a scorpion. I saw this scorpion, and I saw one other scorpion, one tiny little, what I presume is a baby scorpion, whilst I was out in that oasis with the head of the reptile unit at the Prague Zoo, and his daughter, who was doing a PhD on something to do with snakes. We went for a night catch, so walking through the desert, looking for dangerous stuff, basically. We saw, scorpion, that was cool. We saw hunter beetles, these massive beetles that were flying over the sand, catching other beetles. And then, most cool and exciting of all, we saw a gerbil. Like just drifting over the sand like nobody's business. And I really thought the gerbils came from cages, but apparently not. They come from deserts. This was a gundi, very cute little beast. No pictures of the gerbil because it was night and they're tiny. And then my god husband, apparently that's not a real thing, but his son is my godson. So therefore he's my god husband. He came to visit. And I made sure that he had the full rolling with the punctures experience. In 5 days, he had at least 3 or 4 punctures and various other mechanicals. And then we got to the inside of Luke's aunt and uncle's house, which is several hundred kilometers from the outside, the magic of Hollywood. And then rather than enjoying this beautiful, peaceful subterranean, so this is the ground level, is at the top, and then you just have a massive drop to where the houses are. Rather than spending our time enjoying this place, we spend our time inside here shitting ourselves due to indeterminate causes. But I put it down, at least in part, to having cycled every day for 6 weeks. It was almost time to leave Tunisia, and it's time to leave Tunisia in this story, but just to talk briefly about the Amazigh. So this is the flag of the Amazigh people, and Amazigh is a name that is for what is described in other contexts as Berber. And any guesses where the word Berber shares its roots with? Huh? Sorry?
It's I know Berber farm in Morocco.
Yeah, I mean, the actual name word Berber is similar and related to like barbarian, and you know, it's a racist colonial term essentially. So this kind of name of Amazigh is self-described, is how this group of people is starting to self-describe themselves and kind of claim an identity that has been put on them by colonialist powers. This is the alphabet of the Amazigh people, which was cool. Really bad picture. This was during the shitting myself period, so photography was not top of my list. From there, a very, very bad boat to Italy. Italy, I don't really need to tell you, is a freaking amazing place. This is on the Veneto Divide, which I could talk about for its own hour. The hardest 10 days of cycling I've ever done in my life, but extremely beautiful. There's also a chance for stupid jokes and the worst mud I've ever come across in my life. Especially bad as it was during a 150 kilometer day, which up to that point was the longest day of cycling I've ever done in my life. Some wildlife. This is a chamois up on that Veneto Divide. And then Slovenia, which again, Slovenia I could talk about for a long time. It's an amazing civilized country, but I'm encapsulating it in this one slide of a beautiful pedestrian bridge over a lovely river surrounded by nature. Lovely place, you should go there. Croatia is another place that I could talk about for a long time positively, but I'm just going to talk about for a short time negatively. This was, you know, some paths are too bad to be true. This is a path on Komoot, the map. I kept being like, surely at this next turn it will get better. This was first turn, second turn, third turn. That's the path I've just come through. It was basically a bog. I lost my phone at one point, fell off my handlebars, had to go wade back through the bog to find it. Was just getting pursued by mosquitoes and flies and sun. So there was like no chance of a rest for like all the hours that I was pushing my bike through this high freaking swamp. But I was wanting to get through Croatia quickly because I wanted to get to Bosnia, because Bosnia is a super, super special place. I'd been there before on a bicycle trip and I really wanted to go back, and it was just as special when I went back. These people are in the Srpska Republika part of Bosnia, and they're like, oh yeah, us Srpska Republika people, we're great, but those Bosniaks or those Croats down the road, oh, don't trust them. And you go like 500 meters down the road and they're like, yeah, we're great, but don't trust those people down the road. And each one of them gave me amazing hospitality and were super friendly. Not to say the country being full of like 100,000 kilometers of gravel roads, which I don't quite understand the mathematics of, but people kept repeating it to me, so I do believe it. I basically crossed the whole country on sweet grav. There's also things like beautiful waterfalls, incredible forested areas. Like living in the UK, growing up in Scotland, I didn't really understand what a forest was until I went to the Balkans. It's like, in Scotland, it's like, here's a bunch of trees shaped like a gun. In Bosnia, it's like, here's a forest that you can cycle through for 4 or 5 hours and you're still gonna cycle through it for several more hours. Wild and beautiful and rugged and really living was one of the words that kind of came to my mind around Bosnia. This was one of the best bit of cycling I did, just above Sarajevo. Stunning mountain area. And also just casually, the deepest canyon in Europe. It's just like, from the nearest town there was a sign being like, canyon. And then go up this like dirt track, a dead end dirt track, come to the viewing platform, which is just one bench, to this view of the deepest canyon in Europe. Like, unbelievable, the kind of understatedness of it. Yeah, and another thing about Bosnia, so I met Nino, who was a mountain bike guide, and he was like, yeah, you gotta be careful because you might see a bear. This is why you don't get AI to do your slides. Anyway, this is crossing into Montenegro. So up that dirt track that led me to the canyon, I followed that dirt track. It came to the border. I crossed the border illegally into Montenegro and carried on my way. I had some sort of like nervousness as to what's going to happen with the next border I cross, so I held on to that. Montenegro, it's basically like Scotland. Scotland's that bit up north. but with actual proper forests and way better weather. Montenegro was also where I met Suza, who was the first woman cycling solo that I'd met in the whole trip. This is 4.5 months into the trip, which is awful, essentially. Like, I mean, I don't necessarily think that anyone should go off cycling on their own for loads of time. Like, it's quite a lonely existence. At some point, I realized I was wearing this racing vest that kind of held me around the chest, and I was like, why do I feel so good wearing that vest? And then I was like, it's because it's like having a hug. And I'm just not getting many hugs these days. But back to the point about that it's wild that, you know, there's some perception that women couldn't or shouldn't go off traveling on their own. And so I'm really keen to show people like Suza who are and who did and who have. We crossed the Montenegrin highlands together, which was ridiculously great. And then we came down back into civilization and immediately met 2 more women traveling solo, but that was actually the only women that I met of the whole 8 months or so on the road traveling solo, which was nuts. Brief wildlife interlude, bringing us to Kosovo. Kosovo, very special place, has a very special place in my heart, not least because in the trip I did before this trip, I got locked down in this town, which is called Prizren, and I was in lockdown, and I like puns, and it's called Prizren. I went back there on this trip to attend the DocuFest, which is a 10-day short film and documentary film festival where they set up these amazing cinemas. This is like on the edge of a castle overlooking the city, which looks even more amazing and twinkly at night. And then over some more mountains into Albania, north of Albania, insanely beautiful and rugged place. Like north of Albania and Bosnia, special places in my heart. This, this kind of gives you some sense of the scale of it. It's known variably as the Accursed Mountains if you're Serbian and you're like, those are cursed mountains, we'd have conquered them if it weren't for them, or the Albanian Alps. It also has the Lake Koman, which is this amazing lake where you go on a ferry for like several hours along, just surrounded by these sheer cliffs, and occasionally people get off at random spots, get a donkey and just disappear into the mountains. Albania is fascinating. The lore that was created in this area that was complete, because it was such a wild area, they kind of had to be self-regulating in some ways. And this law, like, it has some pretty severe stuff, like what's the blood feud? Blood feud is one of the key elements of it, where if you do something wrong to another family, then they'll kill all the male members of your family for 7 generations. So pretty serious. But some of the reasons that you could get into these blood feuds I found really interesting. Like, supposedly if you were found fishing with poison, blood feud. If you were over-exploiting wild bees, blood feud. Like, bees are basically holy in the culture, which, I mean, fair play. That is a good way to see bees. Bees are freaking awesome. From Albania, we somehow skip across North Macedonia. I have no pictures of North Macedonia, and arrive in Greece. So one thing I didn't say at the start, in England, I was setting off from my dad's home country. My dad is the man at the back with the camera. And then arrived in Greece, which is my mother's home country. And this was a super special moment, and I'm very glad to say that, yes, at least one of the people in this photo is here tonight, Mr. David Charles. Woo! This was I was part of the Thighs of Steel coming into Greece. Thighs of Steel is Europe's biggest charity fundraising bike ride that goes in relay from Glasgow to Athens. Do speak to David or Suze or Zena or Anna.
I'm not an organizer,
people. And Alex about it if you're interested. It's a fantastic way to move around, and also it raises money for displaced people, refugees, and groups working with those people, which is extremely convenient considering where this story is about to go. Greece, beautiful. One of the things about traveling by bike is that you come across all sorts of places that you might not otherwise, were you to just jump between it and a country by train or by car. So one thing that kept coming up in conversations with people was water. This is in the north of Spain, a reservoir that has rebirthed its town that was sunk for it in the start of March, when you'd expect a reservoir might have some water in it. Water as a kind of topic of conversation kept coming up in chats I was having with people, like all over the place. Within a couple of sentences, they'd be like, oh yeah, and the rains are off. And I know that that's hard to imagine living in the UK, where we've just had our wettest winter ever, maybe. Yeah, things are messed up, and it's messing people up, and it's sending people into crazy situations, which I was fortunate enough to see extremely graphically firsthand. I'm going to go back to Tunisia. So I'm in Tunisia, and I'm on the coast, just above a town called Sfax, which is the second city of Tunisia. And this is not the beautiful Tunisian coast that most people would go and visit, where there's nice seas and beautiful beaches. It's grubby. Like, it smells, there's things burning, it's rough, and as I'm cycling along it into a savage headwind, I get a sense that, like, I'm going to see something bad, that there's something bad in this area. Going around corners, and finally I come around this corner, and there's this pile of clothes on the ground, and I realize that it's not a pile of clothes, it's a person inside some clothes, and they're dead. This is one of kind of almost countless people trying to cross from North Africa to Europe. I mean, the situation that must have led this person to leave their home and their family and their food and, you know, the local walks that they know and everything that keeps you connected to a place, to go and try and cross the Mediterranean from here to go to Lampedusa, which is a tiny speck in the middle of the ocean, and then end up dead on this grubby bit of coastline, was just absolutely heartbreaking. And I was essentially stunned. Like, I stood there watching this and thinking, I don't know what to do. Like, I can't really communicate this to people in Arabic. I know that there's people around, they're going to find this body, but I also kind of know that they're not really going to have much to do with it. Like, the morgues in that part of Tunisia are full. Later that day, I described to some fishermen what I had seen, and they kind of nodded sympathetically, and they were like, yeah, I mean, that used to be a tragedy, and now that's just like what happens every day. Yeah, there's no great uplifting point I'm about to make here. This is a shit situation, and one that we need to think about how we respond to as a society and have some empathy about it. What I am going to end with, though, is this picture of my friend Lucy being a badass and enjoying it. I think that it's not necessary to, you don't necessarily need to see something to be something, but it can be easier to see something to be something if you can see it. I also like this picture showing her enjoying and embracing what could otherwise be seen as a shit situation. We are all going to need to be much better at facing shit situations. That's just basically the only choice that we have in future, but we need to do it with some sort of joy and some sort of ability to see that we are all going to be rolling with the punctures in the future. I'm going to finish by saying cheers. You've been a lovely audience. I'd like to say a big thank you to Diego for hosting in this beautiful, beautiful shop. I have one slide of lots of organisations in London and around London that are there for helping more women get out and be on those big adventures. So if you're at all interested, take a picture or send me a message afterwards. I can send you the list. That's also fine. They go from mountain biking to road biking to everything in between. Like I said, I don't think everyone should necessarily go and do those adventures, but everyone should feel able to. And last but not least, thanks very much. My name is Mike. I have a website where you'll also find some details about his sweet merch. There are some links to some of the organisations I've mentioned in the talk. we now have time for some questions if anyone would like. Everyone isn't too harrowed by what I've just been talking about, which I can get. It's quite heavy. You're also very welcome to ask me questions one-to-one afterwards. Thank you very much. Question over here.
My question is, it sounds as though you had an amazing time in Tunisia. But I wonder if you knew that there is actually an overland route from Spain to Greece. You don't have to go to Algeria.
What? Oh, man! Come on!
So yeah, why did you do that? Why did you go there?
So this, oh, thanks so much. Perfect. So plans are made to be broken. Originally, my plan was to go to South America, and then I figured that was quite far away, and there was some things I would like to get to in Europe around this sort of time. Like I went to a family wedding on the way, and I went and volunteered at that documentary film festival and stuff like that. So then I was like, okay, so I'll go more Europe-based, and so I was like, but I'd like to go somewhere I've not been before. So then I was going to cycle down Spain, go to Morocco, and go along North Africa. But you can't get from Morocco to Algeria. The borders are closed. So I was like, fine, I'll go to Algeria. Turns out Algeria, they're fairly strict on visas, and scruffy bikepackers, they're a bit like, no, we've got plenty of money to not need your crap money. So they rejected my visa application essentially. But also, I'd been researching Algeria as a bikepacking destination, and there was really very little, and I felt a bit intimidated by it. It was a bit too much adventure for me. So then I figured it would be cool to still go to somewhere in the Maghreb, and so Tunisia felt because I've been to Morocco, I've been lucky enough to go to Morocco in other ways before, so it felt like Tunisia was a new place, and one that there was some, but not loads about people cycling there already. So yeah, that's how.
What did you learn from the solo female cyclists about how they'd responded to either perceived or real challenges of being a solo female cyclist?
It wasn't really a conversation. It's not really a conversation I have with men, so it's not really a conversation I have with women, I guess.
Did they bring up anything?
No, I mean, I guess we just chatted about random cycling stuff. Yeah. Not a very satisfactory answer, perhaps.
Thank you for that. I feel like in places. But I'm the kind of adventurer where the most important part of the day is the meal, and I was curious about that aspect of this trip. Mm-hmm. What were you eating?
Everything and anything, basically. Second breakfast, am I right? When I have control of my diet, I'm more towards the vegan and vegetarian end of the spectrum, but I would, especially in Tunisia, go into a place and be like, one food, please, and kind of whatever emerged was be what I ate. I could have definitely been a bit more stingy and cooked my own things more, by certainly, as you're saying, the food is an important part, so not just eating pasta and red lentils, which was a staple, but not the most exciting.
But when you were heading out into the desert, what would you put in your panniers for?
I had a very memorable grilled chicken, a full grilled chicken meal, just wrapped up in loads of bags that I had in the salt factory, which really was an interesting mix of the setting and the meal being quite different. Yeah, I'm very bad at being disciplined about having enough food. I'm just I've got some of this stuff and some of that stuff, and at some points ending up basically eating butter with peanut butter with a spoon. Another particular top tip is pretzel sticks with peanut butter inside them, dipped in chocolate spread.
I was literally just thinking about those.
You know it. And of course, every bikepacker's favourite thing, fizzy sweets.
So
Did you just get loads of punctures, or did you ever get more serious bike problems?
I mean,
how do you sort them out if you're...
That's the next talk, rolling with the mechanicals. I had my freewheel and my snap, meaning that I was pedaling and that nothing was turning. Fortunately, I managed to plan that whilst I was up a hill, so I just coasted back down the hill to the nearest bike shop, where they sold me a piece of shit wheel for 200 euros, but they kind of had me by the small hairs because the next bike shop was like 15 miles or kilometers away. That was a good one. I also had to change my bottom bracket, which I've never understood what a bottom bracket was, but I've had a lot of people tell me my bottom bracket needs fixing. That was an interesting experience in understanding just how specific and annoying bike parts are. I literally went to, I think, between 18 and 20 bike shops before I found the actual right part. Aside from that, yeah, those were the major ones. At one point I was dunking my brakes into Coca-Cola because I thought that they had some like crap in them and that maybe the Coca-Cola could clean it out. Limited success. I went through a lot of the trip being like, are my brakes on or am I tired? 50-50 the answer was.
Did you ever have days where you're just like, too sore, I'm not doing it?
No, I did not. I mean, except for Tunisia, where I was really like going all the time, I was much more chill about like taking rest days and whatever.
Hi Mike, that was really amazing by the way.
Nice to see you.
I was wondering, like, did you ever, what sort of was the most dangerous situation you found yourself in? Do you ever feel like, oh my god, this is scary, like this is like dangerous?
So there was a point in Italy on this Veneto divide where you're basically on a hiking path in the pre-Dolomites, because they're only like, they're not the real ones, they're only at 2,000 meters, so it's not that high. And on essentially a hiking trail, and on the one side is a like rock face, and the other side is like a 1,000 meter drop. I'm trying to cycle on that, and then occasionally there'll be like roots and stuff. That was quite dangerous, but I'm a wimp, so I really would like only cycle if it felt like it was pretty safe. Yeah, that was probably the most like risky feeling.
But no like encounters with like people that scared you or anyone being aggressive towards you?
There was some kids throwing stones occasionally in Tunisia or things like that, which like was just like friendly banter, I think. What's the question here?
Yeah, in terms of mileage, did you cover like a consistent mileage throughout the whole, or was it varied?
No, I went from about 5 kilometers to like 195 kilometers, I think was the sort of spread. More towards the 5. Like I did like maybe 8,000 kilometers over the whole time of like 7 months, which I've informed is not very much at all.
2 questions. Were you not constantly chased by dogs in Tunisia?
No, I didn't. I don't remember many dogs.
How did you get started doing
Bike touring and stuff?
remotely?
How did I get started? I mean, I guess I've always cycled. Like at school, I was like the one kid who would always cycle to school. I now sort of realise. And then, yeah. And then I spoke about doing a big tour. I was like the boy who cried tour for literally maybe 10 years. And then I met a woman, and she was like, right, I'm going to run to Mongolia. See you later. And I was like, holy shit, I want to go to Mongolia. So I set off with a bike because I'm not going to run to Mongolia. That's wild. And that really got me into like really, really big stuff. But the first kind of bike packing, if you want to call it that, tour I did was start off by going to Italy on the train without a bike and thinking maybe I'll do some cycling. Ending up buying Sylvia, her name is, a beautiful Italian silver city bike, not at all suited for what I had to put her through. Strapping my rucksack with bungee cords to the rear rack, and off I went. Still one of the greatest trips of ever, I think. Yeah. chaotically is probably the best way to say. Cool. Anyone else? Anything you'd like to know?
Where's next?
Oh, so you've done that. That's fine. Boring. Give us another hour of entertainment. I just got a quote unquote proper job, so I have no plans to go anywhere big, anywhere soon. And maybe I'm done with it. Maybe that's it. Maybe I'll scratch that itch. Who knows? Watch this space. What's that?
What's the proper job?
It's working for a very nice bike organisation in Glasgow, helping people to build bikes, which, as we've seen, I'm not necessarily the world's greatest bike mechanic yet, but there's a one way to learn. By getting paid to do it. Great. Any more? Please do send me mess.
Where's your next stop on the tour?
Bristol, Friday night. Almost sold out. About 5 tickets left to sell, I think. So this is way more sold out than I imagined it. Well done, London. You turned up.
How are you getting to Bristol?
I am gonna try and cycle. I've had a hole in my back for the last 2 months following a surgery, so I've not cycled a lot in the last little while, but it's really flat and it's England, so it's easy. And it's not until Friday, so I've got 2 days and some. So I might cheat and get the train some of the way, but I have a warm showers host in Newbury tomorrow night, so I'm hoping to get there by hook/crook.
Awesome. Well, good luck.
What's
What?
your bike called?
Joe. So yeah, Joe King, because surely you can be serious.
Do you think anything would change? Anything you would change about the bike?
So one thing I didn't talk about was Tunisia. My bike when I set off, it was tubeless ready, meaning that, but I had tubes in it. But Tunisia made me tubeless ready, so I would have probably started off with tubeless because it made it much less faff and more smooth riding. What people seem to be getting into these days is suspension handlebar bits, which seems like a pretty bougie but amazing thing. Aside from that, no, I don't know. It's beautiful. She's great. I love her.
So some shock absorption of the front.
Maybe, yeah. Just
And tubeless, so you would run tubeless.
I think so,
Why is
yeah. Huh?
Why?
Because I ended up getting tubeless halfway through this Veneto divide, which essentially is a mountain bike route. And so once I did that, then I could run my tires a little bit softer. So then, the bumpy rocks were not quite as bumpy. And also I got much fewer punctures as well. So that would be.
And I can fix pretty much everything on a bike. So I was wondering what things, I don't want to carry a whole workshop with me, and I could make use of it. But what do you think are the essential things that you would carry with you tool-wise?
Yeah, I mean, if you're having tubeless, then certainly some plugs to plug any really big holes in your tubes. The right, whatever you call them, Allen keys, and a chain tool, which I learned that on my first big trip when I was trying to fix a chain, having never fixed a broken chain, using a pair of pliers and some glue, which worked a little bit, more than you'd expect, right? Tire lever, huh?
Did you say glue?
Yeah, super glue. I just slammed the chain together, put a load of glue on it, clamped it with the pliers, pedaled a bit. I think in total I cycled about 5 kilometers using that system. And then my bike basically became a glorified push scooter. Wait.
Show me that.
Yeah. Yeah, it might save you a few quid. I mean, that's not broken. Stick some glue on it. Certainly tire levers, also at least one spare inner tube, especially if you're going into the wilds, and some patches, even if you are running tubeless.
Mike, you proved all you need to fix a bike is imagination.
Exactly. MacGyver the shit out of that thing. And also a big smile. That goes a long way. Apart from that, I mean, spokes. I had a few broken spokes at the start for some reason. And I just limped my way to the nearest bike shop and got them to do it because I was like, I don't know how it works, make it happen. Apart from that, yeah, even in Tunisia I found new brake pads and I found new tires and everything that I kind of needed enough. Maybe I was lucky. Some people carry spare tires and all that shit. Any other tools? Well, I mean, the greatest thing that you should always carry, no matter where you are, is a titanium spork. Also a good makeshift tire iron. This bend is from that. I really thought the titanium would have been stronger than that, but apparently not. Also good as a makeshift poop shovel. Pre-pooping. Never actually touches the poop. As much as, hygiene standards slip on a bike tour. Not that much, come on. Yeah, on the topic of food.
And more or less, what's the setup like? What are we looking at here?
Oh, glad you asked. So here is my little big Agnes, my tent. A lovely little one-person tent, which I'd love to bits. I normally would go with a bivvy, but for that much time, I mean, I think I camped like 60 or 70 nights in the space of the year. So I took a tent, nice and light and small. Here there was, my setup changed day to day. I literally, every morning I'd be like, right, how does this fit together? And it would change. So every morning it took about 2 hours, minimum. But often there would be like my inflatable mat would go in here and my first aid kit children. Sometimes my cooking stove and pot and like gaffer tape, like duct tape. Duct tape and zip ties is going to be the title of my autobiography. Here we often had like spare jackets. I had like a down jacket, like a duck down jacket and a synthetic down jacket for the colder parts of the trip. I imagine there was other things in there as well. And then I had another similar bag like that on the other side, which had my tools, my garage, and then there would be a bottle of water here. This was normally a big 3-litre like reservoir with a hose that came up here so you could suckle as you went along. And then food. This was also food. Occasionally phones, but often food. This, some more bits of kit, sometimes phone. And then in here, just about one spare set of clothes that I brought with me, and quilt rather than a sleeping bag. Took a quilt because it's just like half a sleeping bag, because I knew that most of the time I would be going to quite warm places, so I didn't need that much temperature, and it would be smaller and lighter. I used to be like pack heavy, plan light. Now I'm like plan a little bit heavier, pack a bit lighter, and I think that was about it. Occasionally for a while I had a spare pair of shoes as well, and then I had a little race vest for half of it, which more food basically. Sunglasses. Cool.
Do you regret not taking the sleeping bag?
I really love the coziness of getting up in the sleeping bag, but I really love the small and lightness of the quilt. And I had the quilt and sleeping bag liners, so it still had that sort of cocooniness. And yeah, I didn't, except for one night, the first and only night that I camped in Britain, where I was like, oh, I might be cold tonight if I don't put my socks on. Didn't put my socks on and I was cold. Apart from that, I pretty much didn't have any nights where I was cold. I mean, in the topic of water, I had barely a handful of days where it rained in the whole 7 months, which is mental. One of the days that it did rain, though, I had the closest lightning strike of my whole life in Tunisia, which was holy shit. So children, if you're cycling in a thunderstorm, stop, put your bike aside, crouch down, get on your tippy toes, and just basically cross your fingers. That's the going advice. Yeah.
Getting back to your bike, is there any particular reason why you don't have a rear rack?
Don't need it. It's another thing to break. On my previous trip, I had the most chaotic, stressful setup you've ever seen with a rear rack and one of these, and the rear rack got sheared and it's just an excuse to put more stuff on, the more space you have to carry stuff as well. Also, as you can tell from these big fat tires, I was trying to be more on sweet grav and off-road, so a rack and panniers can be get jiggled around quite a lot if you're doing a lot of that. And this can flap around a bit, which people seem to make a big deal of, and I'm like, who cares? Like it's going to stay on. Yeah. But I mean, in the right settings, rack, love a rack. Front rack as well. Lovely, good stuff. Yeah, as I say, oh, one more here.
Did you have any, what was sort of the most serious, like, medical situation you were in? Did you have to use your first aid kit?
I mean, I had...
Other than the dysentery.
Yeah, that I just like, just rest was the only thing for that. Rest and kindly Slovenian and Polish men on the ferry over from Italy. Oh, those guys. Matej and Matej, my heroes. I had a very stupid fall in Albania where I like opened up my knee and just had to get all the things in my first aid kit to like slam into that. I think that was it.
No
Yeah.
scorpion bites or snake bites?
No, I know. I mean, the guy from Prague, he was like, "It's okay, you won't see a snake unless you're going into like remote places, moving fast." And I was like, "Oh, all the things you do with a bike." Yeah, no, I was fairly lucky. Touch wood. Cool, great. Thanks everyone. Thanks again to Diego and to the team here. Well done, you. If you do happen to know people who might like to see this rambling jaunt in Bristol, Lewis, Macclesfield, Glasgow, Kirkcaldy, big one, and Forres, please send them my way, or send them the way of the website. It's also good. Yeah.